Alex, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you my Reddit Fantasy Bingo Wrap-Up. Over on Reddit Fantasy, there is a bingo that goes up in April, and you have until the end of the following March to read through the books that are on the prompt. And there is an easy mode and a hard mode, and I will leave links down below the post for this so that you can check it out. There is a new one coming this April, so obviously I am excited to be getting into that, and I will be having a TBR for that. I very rarely actually stick to the TBRs. They're just because I just read and then allocate the books as and when possible, and then March make a mad scramble to finish things. This year I didn't actually have to do that, which was quite nice. I have hit hard mode on the vast majority of these, but I will specify which ones I haven't. But let's go. So for the first prompt, it is to read a book that is the first in a series. As a series reader, easy peasy. Hard mode, to read a book that is the first in a series that is more than 3 books long. Also relatively easy. And I have read The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu for this prompt. This one is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty series, which is a 4-book series. I have a dedicated review for this, but I had a really good time with this series. This first book was a bit hit and miss, but the rest of the series I absolutely loved. I enjoyed this one a lot more than I had heard I would. Before you hear everyone being like, oh, the series or the first one's rough, it wasn't as good as the rest, but it was still a good book. So do be sure to check out the series because it is great. And as I said, I'll leave my review for the series linked. The next prompt is alliterative title, in which more than one word within has the same letter to begin with. So for example, the examples on here were Legends and Lattes or Storm of Swords. And the hard mode was a title that had 3 or more words within the title that began with the same letter. So I went with How to Rule an Empire and Get Away with It because we have Anne and Away. So 3 A's in this title. And this is the second book in the Siege trilogy by KJ Parker. This is a series that I had an interesting time with. I didn't really like these books. I did continue on reading the series and I didn't like them any more or less, really. The last one is probably the worst one, but they're not great. I'll leave my series review linked down below. For the third prompt, this is one of the ones that I coincidentally happened to hit in March, so very, very near to the cutoff point. And this prompt is Under the Surface, where you need to read a book where a huge portion or an important setting is under the surface, be it underwater or underground. For this one, I'm not sure if this would count for the hard mode. I read Mists of Memory by N.C. Scrimgeour. This is the second book in the Sea of Souls series. And while we do have a lot of seafaring, I couldn't necessarily say that 50% of the book is underwater, which is the requirement for hard mode. So I've definitely hit it in easy mode, but I don't know if I can say I've hit it in hard mode. Like the 50% thing is quite hard, especially because I read it as an ARC, so I read like a digital copy. I'm much better at being able to tell like how much of a book is in a physical book because I'm really bad with proportions, and obviously like I wasn't checking the percentage the entire time I was reading the book, so I'm not sure if it would hit it or not. But it's a book that I really enjoyed. It's a series I've been having an absolute blast with. It's one of my favorite ongoing series at the moment. I was really glad to be reading this one, really lucky to get an ARC, and I would highly recommend you check it out. I'm very excited for the next one. Prompt 4 was criminals, and the book has to be where the main character is a criminal. This could be a thief, an assassin, someone who commits mail fraud was the examples. And hard mode features a heist. I didn't hit this one on hard mode. I don't really like heist stories, but I did hit the prompt because I read One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. And One for My Enemy is following 2 rival like mafia clans. One is ruled over by Baba Yaga and the other by Koschei the Deathless. And they are just rival families. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling. You have the youngest 2 that have fallen in love. Now the youngest 2 aren't particularly necessarily criminals, at least throughout the entire book, but the 2 oldest siblings, so the heirs to each empire, are also POV characters, and they are definitely criminals. So I am very excited to read more by this author due to how much I enjoyed this one. This was a weird experience because the first time I read it, it was 4 stars. There were some things about the audiobook that really annoyed me. And then a few months later, I was just desperate to listen to it again. I was reading other Baba Yaga books and I kept hearing Baba Yaga and it just kept making me think of One for My Enemy, and then I just picked it up and read it. So I had a great time with it the second time around and bumped it up to 5 stars. I don't know what glitch in the universe that was, but had a great time with it. The next prompt is Dreams, and it is a book in which the character experiences dreams, be it magical or otherwise. And then hard mode is the dream is not mystical or unusual, it's just a normal dream or nightmare. And for this one, I went with a book that is not fantasy, it's sci-fi, because then the dreams were not going to be magical. So I have gone for The Death I Gave Him by M.X. Liu. This is a Hamlet retelling, and I really did enjoy this book. It was a very, very good take on Hamlet. I love Hamlet retellings. It's a weird one because like I like Hamlet. It's not my favorite Shakespeare. My favorite is probably Merchant of Venice. But as a Shakespeare retelling, I have read so many really good Hamlet retellings. It's so bizarre. And one of them being The Death I Gave Him. This one is a sci-fi. It's instead of a literal kingdom, it's a corporate empire at stake, and everyone wants this company because this company is working on like regenerative cells that would make you live forever or be able to be revived from death. And we are following it, yes, from the perspective of the Hamlet character, but also from the Ophelia character, and I really did enjoy both of those perspectives. I loved that we still had the Hamlet character being slightly delulu in a way that was still very akin to the Shakespeare-ness, but not mismatched within this sci-fi setting. Also has closed, locked door murder mystery vibes to it as well. Great book. Would highly recommend. Super underhyped. On to the second row. The first one we have is Entitled Animals, which is to read a book that has an animal in the title. And the hard mode is an animal that is either a sci-fi or fantasy creature. I went with the most obvious, easy, hard mode one I could possibly go for, and I have gone with Miss Percy's Definitive Guide to the Restoration of Dragons. Dragons being obviously the key word there. This is the last book in the Miss Percy's Pocket Guide series. I have a review for this series as well. Absolutely love Miss Percy. They are sunshine on a rainy day. Like they're everything I wanted out of this series. Everything I didn't know I needed. This is my end of cozy fantasy. I don't really like cozy fantasy that has no stakes. I love this series because it still has stakes, but it's safe stakes, if that makes sense. Like when you're watching a Disney movie, you're like, you know that things are going to turn out well, but you know, Mufasa still dies, you know? I really like this end of cozy fantasy where there's still stuff going on. It's Regency, it's romance, like super, super slow burn romance, older main character. Would highly recommend checking out this series. The next prompt is Bards. Read a book in which the primary protagonist is a bard, musician, poet, or storyteller, and hard mode is where the character is explicitly called a bard. Now, this shouldn't count, but I'm counting it anyway, and that is The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons. Kieran at the beginning of the book is training to become a bard, so I feel like that counts. He's not actually a bard, but he's a bard's apprentice, so he would have been a bard if he hadn't been taken over by the nobility, and he would have explicitly been called a bard. Maybe in his soul he is a bard, so I'm taking it, because the thing is one of the things that I had issue with this year is like so many of the prompts to do with the bingo are to try and make you read more diversely. There's a POC tile, there's a queer tile, etc. So try and push you out of your comfort zone. And then they do shit like this, where it's like it has to explicitly be called a bard, which makes it pretty European centric. I do appreciate that the RR Verdi ones, I can't remember what they're called. Last Binding, maybe? Those ones, I'll put a cover here. Those ones are, I believe, they do have a bard and they're not European. But all of the other books that I've seen recommended anywhere when I was asking around for bards were all European centric. And I don't care. The only other one that I would have been interested in reading was Till Death Do Us Bard, but the paperback didn't come out in time, and I don't read hardbacks, and I'm trying to step away from buying Kindle books. I went with this one. I'm not competing for anything, so it doesn't really matter, but I went with this one. I do have a dedicated review for this series, and this one is Queer Epic Fantasy. It's also mentioned in my Women in Epic Fantasy video that I put up relatively recently. So if you want more thoughts on this series, go check it out, but I absolutely love this series, and it's on my top 10 list. For number 8, we have Prologues and Epilogues, so a book that has either a prologue or an epilogue. I went with the hard mode, which is that has both, and I went with Sanderson because Sanderson always has them. Let's go look. We've got a prologue and an epilogue. Good old Brandy Sandy. This is also, to date, I believe, my second favourite Sanderson. My favourite being Elantris, which, yes, controversial, I know. I absolutely loved reading Ciri. Vivenna, I struggled with a little bit. And Longsong, whatever his name was. He was alright as well, but Ciri's perspective was my absolute favourite. And I am sorry, but that is Romantasy. Ciri's POV is 100% Romantasy, and I will hear no criticism of it. And I loved it. I had a great time with that one. I am excited that there will be potentially more in this world and more in the Elantris world, because those have been my favourites so far. And of course, they are the ones that have substantially less content in them, because I like being contrary like that. Not on purpose, just how my brain works. So many things going on in here that I really did vibe with. Number 9 is self-published or indie published, and for hard mode it has to have less than 10 ratings on Goodreads. I actually received a review copy of this book from the author, and that is The Wrong Stop by Rex Burke. So at the time of me reading this, there were like 3 reviews on there. So I took this one as a win, and this one feels very much like it would be another Simon Pegg / Nick Frost movie. Like, that was the vibe of it. The humour, the action end of it, the interpersonal relationships between these characters, them being that kind of like messy character that you normally get with the Simon Pegg, Nick Frost movies as well, like just people who are not your typical heroes. They're not people you would normally put in a hero role. They're just overly average dudes who happen to be thrust into this kind of situation. It was a really fun time. It's also a standalone, so I would recommend you go check it out. The author also has a trilogy out that was really good as well, so I would recommend, just all round recommend checking out Rex Burke. I had a great time with his books, and I would highly recommend if you want something fun. Next one I have is Romantasy. Read a book that features a main romantic plot, and for hard mode the main character is LGBTQIA+. I went with Hex Appeal because this was one that has a bisexual protagonist. Nothing else to it really that is particularly LGBT. The romance is straight, but the protagonist is bi. This one is part of the Best Hex Ever trilogy, I believe, by this author. Not to be confused with the Best Hex Ever book that has come out since. This one's a fun time. Like, they're slightly witchy romance novels. This one is pitched as Hocus Pocus meets Encanto, in which we have a woman who lives in this village that is very witchy, and then a guy is coming to try and develop the kind of manor house of the area, and then they get sent back in time. I had a great time with this one. I mean, like, they're never going to get more than 3-star in this series. They're just fun for the sake of being fun. I still had a great time with them. And if you want just a fun witchy romance over the witchy season, then I'd recommend checking them out. In the third row, we have Dark Academia. So obviously a book that fits the Dark Academia aesthetic. And for hard mode, the school itself must be mundane. Now, I have one that teeters on the hard, because I went with Babel by R.F. Kuang. This one being R.F. Kuang's first standalone, and it is her Dark Academia, and it is an anti-colonial style story. And interestingly, this one is set at Oxford University, but it is set in a fictional part of Oxford University called the Tower of Babel, or Babel, depending on what you call it. So you have Oxford University as is, except where the tower is. The tower is somewhere that is usually a park, I think. But the rest of Oxford University is the bog standard Oxford University of this time period, which is 1836. So for me, I still think that this would count as mundane university. Now the tower bit, no, that's fictional. And on top of that, that's where all the magic-y stuff happens. But the rest of the schools are mundane. So I'm still going to take this as a win because it's a literal real university. Not only is it mundane, it's a real university. So I'm taking that still, and no one can tell me otherwise. The next one is a book that is multi-POV. I had several. The first one that came to my mind when I was chucking together my bingo board was Boneshire Daughter by Andrew Stewart. This one has 5 POVs. Lynn, Jovis, Alloway, Ranamani, and Sand. So 5 POVs. That's hard mode. Yeah, multi-POV was just new to read a book that had more than one perspective, and then hard mode was it needed to have at least 5. This one has 5. It works for that. This is a series I, again, have a dedicated series review for. I had a decent time with it. I really liked book 2 especially, which I think is most people's least favourite, but I enjoyed the series as a whole. There just were things in the first one that maybe I struggled with a little bit. And the last one, there was a trope in there that doesn't work for me that kind of permeates the first half of the third book, which was a shame, but I did enjoy the book for the most part. And it was a decent enough series, especially for a debut series. The next prompt being a book that was published in 2024, and Hard Mode being the author's first published novel. For this one, I've gone with Kavithri by Aman J. Bedi. This is one that I was sent by the author, and I have since been sent the sequel as well, and I am so enamored with this series. It's the Poppy War, but make it steampunk India. I had such a good time with this first book. I really love how messy Kavithri is, but she's not quite as infuriating as Rin either. And I love the Poppy War, so no criticism on the Poppy War, but she's not quite as annoying as Rin can get sometimes because of how stubborn Rin is. She's a lot more determined instead of antagonistic, I suppose. I loved reading this series. There is like an older mentor in here that is literally one of my favorite characters that I read last year. This book's in my top 10 of last year. I didn't get on any of my lists because it's not a series that I finished, but it's also not a standalone, so it was a weird one. But on my just outright top 10 books of last year, this was in my top 10 and I loved it so much. I'm really excited to get to book 2. Editing Faye here, checking in to say that I completely forgot one of the prompts. I just clearly skipped over it on the little document that I'd made that I was following. So that was disability representation. For easy mode, it is disability representation, and for hard mode, it is the main character has a disability. And for this one, I have The Gargoyle by Andrew Davids. This one is a romantic kind of magical realism literary fiction book, and in it our protagonist has burns all over his body. He is in a car accident and then is severely injured by it. So I had this one for disability representation. A decent portion of the start of it is actually set in the hospital where he is recovering, so I again figured that this one would work for that. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled program. The next one we have is a book that was published in the 90s. Hard mode is that the author is still releasing books today. I have gone with To Green Angel Tower by Tad Williams. I read the first 2 books prior to April, but I did read the last 2 halves of To Green Angel Tower throughout April and May, I believe, because I participated in the live show for these. I'll leave the live show links. I do also have dedicated series review for this, and I think that this is a really pivotal series when it comes to its involvement in progressing fantasy, because so much of fantasy was very Tolkien derivative, and while this one is to begin with, it definitely begins to form a much more epic fantasy scope that we are accustomed to in modern fantasy. I think a lot of modern fantasy owes a lot to this series, so I'm really glad to have read it. I'm really glad that Stephen Arion made me read this. This book was written in 1993 and the author got out a new book last year. 16 is another one of the prompts that I absolutely hated. It's Orcs, Trolls and Goblins, oh my, and it's a book featuring orcs, trolls or goblins, which again are very European centric. But I have just read one that actually fits this prompt, and that is Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. This one is a Arthurian slash British folklore retelling following Jenny Greenteeth, who is a character from British folklore who is like lives in swamps or lakes and eats children. It was used to keep children away from lakes so they wouldn't swim in them unsupervised. This one I am actually reading for a project that you won't see very much of until I think late June, but I had a good time with this. I had some issues with it, but I absolutely loved this by the end of it. The hard mode is a protagonist that is a goblin, an orc or a troll, and while not necessarily the protagonist, the same way that Annabeth and Grover aren't the protagonists of Percy Jackson, I feel like they still count as main characters. We have that here, but we do have Brachus, who is a hobgoblin, so he counts for this prompt, and I am taking the hard mode for that because I didn't want to read anything else, and also Brachus definitely deserves main character status. The next one is to read a space opera, and the hard mode is someone from a marginalized gender, for example women, trans people and non-binary people. I have gone with The Red Scholar's Wake by Aliette de Bodard. This one is a space opera in which we are following an analyst on a ship, and then the ship is taken over by pirates, and it's a investigation that goes on this ship. I had a good time with this. I think that it was a very interesting story, but I would have liked to have loved it more. I just didn't connect with it on any emotional level. So while it was an entertaining read, I just didn't fall in love with any of the characters. I didn't feel wholly immersed in the setting as much as I wanted to. So I just wanted more from it than I got, but I did have a good enough time with it. So if you're looking for a space opera and you've read Aliette de Bodard before, I'm sure that you'll like this. I just don't think that Aliette de Bodard's writing is quite for me, which is a shame. For the next one, we have Author of Colour, which is to read a book by an author of colour. Hard mode is that it must be a debut novel that has been published in the last 5 years. So for this one, I went with The Chaos Wielder, and this one is a dark romance. It is quite smutty, it's erotic, it's poly, it's a sci-fi fantasy hybrid, and there was actually a lot more world building in here than I expected from a romantasy, which was really good. It's arguably for me a little tiny bit too long for a romantasy, but I did really enjoy it, and I have the second one ready to go. I don't know why I haven't read it yet, but I've got it ready to go. The next prompt is survival, and we have the hard mode being that it can't be a pandemic or an outbreak, no super viruses or pandemics. So I have gone with A Sword of Bronze and Ashes by Anna Smith Spark, because these are people who, due to the protagonist's past, are now being hunted, so they need to survive, but in a different way. There was another book that I had on my TBR for this, but I didn't get around to reading, which is a shame. But this is one of my favourite books ever, and Anna Smith Spark is probably my favourite author, if not my second favourite author, alongside Hugh Jemisin, and this one was no exception. This book is so beautiful, it's so harrowing at times. The protagonist is just amazing. She always centres motherhood, which I always really appreciate, so I had a great time with this. I have a review coming, I think, in one of my Vanderlyn batch reviews soon, so I will leave further thoughts, but I would just check out Anna Smith Spark. Anything about Anna Smith Spark, just go check it out, please. The next prompt is to judge a book by its cover, and hard mode was to not read the blurb. Now, I didn't read the blurb, but I had heard vaguely what this was about off of the internet, but I haven't read the blurb, and I did pick it up because of who the author is, mostly. I picked up Certain Dark Things. There were a couple of Silvia Moreno Garcia books on the shelf when I picked this up, and this one got my eye more. I had heard that this was vampires, but that was all I knew. I didn't know that it was Mexico City is a oasis of vampires, and basically it's kind of like drug cartels but make it vampire clans instead. I didn't actually like this one very much. I had a rough time with it. I just was bored. I didn't care about the characters. Everyone's motivation seemed really stupid, and everyone seemed to be acting really stupidly, and I just didn't vibe with it at all. It's the first thing of Silvia Moreno Garcia is that I've not enjoyed those, so there was bound to be a dud, I suppose, in there somewhere, and this was it. But if it sounds cool to you, I wouldn't deter you from reading it. I just personally didn't connect with it. It's not anything hugely wrong with it. It just didn't work for me the way I wanted it to. And we're on to the final row. The final row, in which we have the first one, which is set in a small town. And hard mode, the small town can be real or fictional, but the broader setting has to be our real world, not a secondary world. And for this one, I have gone with Wayward. This one is one that came out last year. It was very popular last year. It only just counts, I think, as fantasy. Like, it's very, very slight, but it's got witchy vibes to it, which I really did appreciate. While this wasn't necessarily a favourite for me like it was for others, I did really enjoy it. I had a good time with it. I felt like there was a lot to discuss around it, especially when it comes to escaping a situation of domestic violence and also, healing. So I did appreciate it. It just wasn't, I don't think I'm the target audience for that book, but I did enjoy it. I understand that this is more general fiction than my usual niche as well, so it wasn't going quite as hard on some of the topics as I wanted it to, but then there were other bits that were very harrowing and very distinctive, so I did really enjoy the book, and I appreciated the generational side to it. There was one of the aspects of it that I liked more than the rest, but the witchy elements to it were pretty cool. For 22, we have 5 SFF short stories, and hard mode is to read an entire anthology. And I have read The Anatomy of Fear. I actually read 2 last year, so I have multiple options. I have The Anatomy of Fear and The Advent of Winter. The Anatomy of Fear was really cool because basically you had a load of authors select a body part and they wrote a short story connected to that. So you ended up with like a human body of stories, which was fascinating. They were basically fantasy with a level of darkness. If you read this during the Halloween season, do appreciate that it is dark fantasy, not horror. It's not atmospheric. It's not seasonal. It is just dark fantasy. Because I feel like a lot of people have gone in expecting it to be something that it's not and then not enjoyed it. And The Advent of Winter is kind of the same, where it is epic fantasy that has like a level of coldness or winteriness to it, as opposed to it being Christmassy stories. So do bear that in mind, but I enjoy both of these, and they've got lots of authors that I enjoy. There were obviously, as goes with anthologies, some that I liked more than others, but for the most part I had a good time with it. We've got 3 to go. All right, so coming in for Eldritch Creatures. So hard mode is that it can't be part of the Cthulhu mythos, and then yes, Eldritch Creatures. I've gone with The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. I do have a dedicated review for this in one of my batch standalones, which will be linked. And this one is a horror comedy in which we are following a woman named Cara and her friend Simon, who end up in this alternate world that has these really, really creepy creatures that are very eldritch in tone. So while it's not part of the Cthulhu mythos, you can definitely see the eldritchness to it and the Lovecraftianness to it. But it was also hilarious. Like, I don't think I have ever laughed out loud so much to a book, and I had a great time with it. For the next one, we have reference materials. So the book needs to have additional material, for example, maps, a glossary, dramatis personae, etc. And for hard mode, it needs to have more than one of those. So for this one, I am going with The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. We have a map and a glossary. I've read several books that would fit for this. I've reread Malazan. I've read obviously a load of Sanderson, but I wanted an excuse to put this one in here because this is a series I don't talk about enough and I really enjoyed last year. This one is a one that took me a while to get into. I'm not gonna lie, it took me a little bit to actually feel connected with any of the characters, and then suddenly I was super invested in it and I couldn't put it down, and it became a new favorite series. So I would highly recommend checking this out if you are the kind of person that is okay with persevering. I would say that it's definitely worth your while if you do push through, because it does take a little while to sink into, because it just drops you straight into the middle of this world, but it was a good time. And then the final prompt, the last one, was to read a book that was part of one of their read-alongs. Now, I didn't actually join the read-along, and I read this literally down to the wire. I read this until the last day of the readathon, but I did read The Terraformers by Annalee Newitz, which they also did as one of their buddy reads at some point. I think it was back in January. So I've read this, and I am doing a video project on it that you will see later on in the year, and I will be able to chat about it a lot more there. So I don't want to talk about this one too much because I don't want spoilers for that video, but I had a good time with this one and I had a lot to say and a lot of thoughts on it. And there you have it. I feel like I have been talking for all eternity, but I have now gone through the bingo. I am hopefully going to be doing a TBR as soon as the new one drops, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But that's all from me for today, so thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye.